Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into today's incredible story, I want to thank each and every one of you for being part of this amazing community. Your support means the world to us. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our life-changing stories. Now, let me tell you about Alex Morgan. He's the CEO of a $500 million company, but for 2 weeks, he became Sam Parker, a minimum wage office assistant who everyone treated like garbage. What he discovered about his own company will shock you, and what happened when he revealed his true identity will leave you speechless. This is the story of how he went from invisible CEO to undercover employee, and how that experience changed everything he thought he knew about leadership, success, and human dignity. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of this incredible journey. Chapter 1: The Invisible CEO. My name is Alex Morgan, and 8 years ago, I was sleeping on my friend's couch with nothing but a laptop and a dream. Today, I'm the CEO of DataFlow Solutions, a company worth $500 million. But as I sat in my penthouse office overlooking the city skyline, reading the latest employee satisfaction survey, I realized I might have built my empire on a foundation of suffering I never knew existed. The numbers were devastating. Workplace harassment complaints had increased by 300% in the past year. Employee turnover in entry-level positions was at an all-time high. The anonymous comments were even worse. Management treats us like we're disposable. I've been sexually harassed for months, but HR does nothing. They make racist jokes and act like it's normal. I'm afraid to speak up because I'll lose my job. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. How had this happened under my watch? How had I built a company that was destroying the very people who made it successful? For 2 years, I'd been running DataFlow remotely, traveling the world while expanding our international operations. I communicated with senior management through video calls, trusted their reports, believed their assurances that everything was running smoothly. The 200-plus employees at our headquarters had never met me in person. I was just a face on company newsletters and brief video messages. But these survey results told a different story. While I was building my empire, my employees were suffering in silence. My assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Morgan? The senior management team is here for the quarterly review. Send them in." Jennifer Walsh, our HR manager, entered first. At 45, she was polished and professional, with the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. Behind her came Brad Stevens, our operations director, charming, confident, and apparently beloved by the board. Karen Mitchell from accounting followed, along with Mike Torres from IT. "Alex," Brad's voice boomed across the room. "Great to see you back in town. How was Singapore?" "Productive," I said, gesturing for them to sit. "I've been reviewing the employee satisfaction surveys." Jennifer's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, those. We've been meaning to discuss the methodology. Anonymous surveys can be unreliable. Disgruntled employees sometimes exaggerate their concerns. 300% increase in harassment complaints is exaggeration? People are more sensitive these days," Karen said dismissively. "What used to be normal workplace banter is now considered harassment. We can't walk on eggshells for every snowflake who gets their feelings hurt." I felt my jaw clench. "Snowflake? You know what I mean," Karen continued. "Some people just aren't cut out for corporate culture. Maybe they should find jobs more suited to their sensitivities." Mike nodded in agreement. "The weak ones always complain the loudest. We can't let a few bad apples spoil the whole bunch." "Bad apples," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Brad leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Alex, I think what everyone's trying to say is that we have a great team here. Sure, there are always a few malcontents, but the vast majority of our employees are happy and productive. These surveys don't reflect the real culture we've built." I looked around the table at these people I'd trusted to run my company, seeing them clearly for the first time. They weren't just dismissing the complaints. They were actively hostile to the idea that their employees might be suffering. "What about the turnover rate?" I asked. "Natural attrition," Jennifer said smoothly. "Entry-level positions always have high turnover. People use us as a stepping stone to better opportunities. It's actually a compliment to our training programs." "And the specific allegations of sexual harassment?" "Investigated thoroughly," Jennifer replied. "Most were found to be misunderstandings or personality conflicts. We've implemented additional sensitivity training to prevent future miscommunications." I stared at her, realizing that every word out of her mouth was carefully crafted corporate speak designed to minimize and deflect. These people weren't protecting my company. They were protecting themselves. I see, I said finally. Well, thank you for the update. I'll be in town for a while, so I'll be taking a more hands-on approach to operations. The room grew tense. Brad's smile became strained. Of course, Alex. We're always happy to have your input. Though I should mention that too much executive involvement in day-to-day operations can sometimes disrupt the natural flow of management. I'll keep that in mind. After they left, I sat alone in my office, staring out at the city below. Somewhere in this building, people were being harassed, bullied, and abused by the very managers I'd just spoken with. And those managers were so confident in their power, so certain of their protection, that they'd dismissed serious allegations to my face. A traditional investigation wouldn't work. These people were too smart, too experienced at covering their tracks. They'd coached their victims into silence and trained their witnesses to look the other way. If I wanted to know the truth about my company, I'd have to experience it myself. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was going undercover. Chapter 2, Becoming Sam Parker. The transformation took 3 weeks to plan. I couldn't just walk into my own company and pretend to be someone else. I needed a complete identity, a believable backstory, and a physical appearance that would fool people who might have seen my photo in company materials. I started with the name. Sam Parker, using my middle name and my mother's maiden name. It felt strange, like putting on a costume that was somehow both foreign and familiar. The backstory came next. Sam Parker was 28 years old, a community college dropout who'd been working temp jobs for the past 5 years. No stable employment history, no advanced education, no connections or references that couldn't be easily fabricated. He was exactly the kind of person my senior managers would see as disposable. The physical transformation was more challenging. I'd always been tall and lean, but I needed to look smaller somehow. Less confident. I bought clothes from thrift stores, cheap polyester pants, worn button-down shirts, scuffed shoes that had seen better days. I got a haircut at a discount salon, traded my contact lenses for thick-rimmed glasses, and practiced walking with less confidence, speaking with less authority. The hardest part was the mindset. For 8 years, I'd been Alex Morgan's CEO. I commanded rooms, made decisions that affected hundreds of people, spoke with the authority of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. Now I had to become Sam Parker, a temp worker who apologized for existing and grateful for any opportunity. I arranged for Sam to be hired through DataFlow Solutions, an agency we'd used before. The paperwork was handled by an outside contact who owed me a favor. As far as DataFlow's HR department knew, Sam Parker was just another temporary assistant assigned to help with filing and basic administrative tasks. My first day was a Monday morning in October. I took the bus to work instead of my usual Tesla, carrying a brown bag lunch and a thermos of coffee like I'd seen other employees do. The DataFlow building looked different from street level, imposing, intimidating, designed to make visitors feel small. I walked through the lobby where I'd once been greeted by name, where security guards had jumped to attention when they saw me coming. Now I was invisible, just another worker bee in cheap clothes carrying a temporary ID badge. "You must be Sam," said the receptionist, barely looking up from her computer. "Jennifer Walsh wants to see you in HR before you start." Jennifer's office was on the 3rd floor, decorated with motivational posters about teamwork and success. She looked up when I knocked, her expression already dismissive. "Sam Parker?" She glanced at a file on her desk. "Temp agency sent you for general administrative support?" "Yes, ma'am." "Ma'am." She laughed. How refreshingly old-fashioned. "Well, Sam, let me be clear about expectations. You're here to do whatever needs doing, filing, copying, coffee runs, whatever the permanent staff requires. You're not here to make friends, offer opinions, or cause problems. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am. And another thing, I see from your file that you've had inconsistent employment history. Let me be blunt. We don't tolerate laziness, attitude problems, or drama. You're easily replaceable, so I suggest you remember that." I nodded, biting back the response that wanted to come. This was Jennifer Walsh, the woman I'd trusted to manage human resources, talking to a new employee like they were already a problem to be managed rather than a person to be welcomed. "Your supervisor will be Karen Mitchell in accounting. She'll explain your duties. Try not to disappoint her." Karen Mitchell's desk was in the accounting department, surrounded by cubicles filled with people who looked up nervously when I approached. She was a thin woman in her 50s with sharp features and an expression that suggested she'd been personally offended by my existence. "So you're the temp," she said without looking up from her computer. "Great. Another one I have to babysit. I'm here to help however I can, Ms. Mitchell." "It's Mrs. Mitchell, and you can help by staying out of my way and doing exactly what you're told. See that pile of files?" She pointed to a stack of papers that reached nearly to the ceiling. "Those need to be sorted alphabetically and entered into the database. Think you can handle that without screwing it up?" "Yes, Mrs. Mitchell. We'll see. Your desk is over there." She pointed to a small table in the corner, barely large enough for a computer and a few files. "And Sam, I don't know what kind of places you've worked before, but here we maintain professional standards. That means showing up on time, dressing appropriately, and not bothering the real employees with your problems." I spent my first morning sorting files and trying to understand the dynamics of the office. What I saw made my stomach turn. Karen Mitchell ruled her department like a petty tyrant, snapping at employees for minor mistakes, making sarcastic comments about their appearance or intelligence, and creating an atmosphere of constant tension. I watched her berate Maria Santos, a young woman who was clearly doing her best despite being overwhelmed with work. "Maria, these reports are late again. What's your excuse this time?" "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell. My daughter was sick last night, and I don't want to hear about your personal problems. Your job is to get your work done on time, period. If you can't handle that, maybe you should find a job more suited to your capabilities." Maria's face flushed with embarrassment and anger, but she just nodded and returned to her desk. I could see other employees watching, their expressions a mixture of sympathy and relief that they weren't the target. At lunch, I sat alone in the break room, eating my sandwich and listening to conversations around me. What I heard was revealing. "Karen's in a mood again," someone whispered. "When isn't she? Did you see what she did to Maria this morning? Poor Maria. She works harder than anyone here, but Karen treats her like garbage. Why doesn't someone report her?" "To who? Jennifer? She's worse than Karen. And Brad Stevens is too busy hitting on the new girls to care about anything else. Remember what happened to Lisa when she complained about Brad? Yeah, suddenly her performance reviews were terrible, and she was fired for not meeting expectations. The message is clear: keep your head down and your mouth shut, or you're gone." I felt sick listening to this. These were my employees, people whose paychecks I signed, and they were living in fear of the very managers I'd trusted to take care of them. The afternoon brought my first direct encounter with Brad Stevens. He appeared at my desk around 3 p.m., his presence immediately making the nearby female employees tense up. "You must be the new temp," he said, looking me up and down with obvious disdain. "Sam, right?" "Yes, sir." "Well, Sam, I need you to run some errands for me. Think you can handle that?" "Of course, sir." He handed me a list that included picking up his dry cleaning, getting his car washed, and buying coffee for a meeting. None of these were work-related tasks, but I took the list without complaint. "And Sam, make sure you get the good coffee, not that swill from the machine. I'll know if you cheap out on me." As I left to run his errands, I heard him talking to one of the female employees. "Sarah, you look nice today. That dress really shows off your assets." "Thank you, Mr. Stevens," came the uncomfortable reply. I've been thinking we should discuss your career development. Maybe over dinner sometime. I know some great places where we could talk privately." I wanted to turn around and fire him on the spot. Instead, I kept walking, my hands clenched into fists, knowing that I needed to document everything before I could act. The rest of my first week followed a similar pattern. I was given menial tasks, treated with casual disrespect, and forced to watch as my employees were systematically bullied and harassed by the very people I'd trusted to lead them. Mike Torres from IT was particularly cruel, using his technical knowledge to make other employees feel stupid and inadequate. I watched him deliberately give wrong instructions to David Kim, a recent college graduate who was clearly brilliant but shy. "No, no, no," Mike said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "That's not how you do it. Didn't they teach you anything in college? Or maybe the language barrier is making this too complicated for you." David's face burned with shame as other employees looked away, unwilling to intervene but clearly uncomfortable with the racist undertones of Mike's comments. "I'm sorry," David said quietly. "Could you explain it again?" "I could, but I'm not sure it would help. Some people just aren't cut out for technical work." Maybe you should consider a career more suited to your background. I made a note in my phone, adding Mike's behavior to the growing list of evidence I was collecting. Every insult, every act of harassment, every moment of cruelty was being documented. But documentation wasn't enough. I needed to experience the full scope of what my employees were going through. And as my second week began, I was about to discover just how deep the toxicity ran. Chapter 3: The Descent into Hell. My second week as Sam Parker began with what I thought would be a routine morning, but quickly devolved into something that made me question everything I thought I knew about human decency. I arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, as I had every day, and found a note on my desk from Karen Mitchell. Sam, clean out storage room B12. Everything must be sorted and cataloged by end of day. Don't disappoint me. Storage room B12 was in the basement, a cramped, poorly lit space filled with years of accumulated files, broken office equipment, and what appeared to be several families of mice. The task was clearly designed to be humiliating, a way of putting the temp in his place. I was about an hour into the work when I heard voices in the hallway outside. I recognized Karen Mitchell's sharp tone immediately. I don't care what your excuse is, Maria. The reports were due yesterday, and they're still not finished. Mrs. Mitchell, I stayed until 9 p.m. working on them, but the system kept crashing and... The system was fine. I checked with IT. You're just making excuses because you can't handle the workload. That's not true. I can show you the error messages. Are you calling me a liar? There was a pause, and I could imagine Maria's face, torn between defending herself and keeping her job. No, ma'am. I'm sorry. I'll have the reports finished by noon. You'll have them finished by 10 a.m., and you'll stay late tonight to make up for the time you wasted making excuses. And Maria, this is going in your file. 3 more incidents like this, and you're gone. I heard footsteps walking away, then the sound of quiet crying. I wanted to go out there, to comfort Maria, to tell her that none of this was her fault. But I couldn't break character. Not yet. Around 10:30, I was summoned to Brad Stevens' office. He was sitting behind his desk with his feet up, talking on the phone in a voice loud enough for the entire floor to hear. Yeah, she's definitely interested. You should see the way she dresses. She's practically asking for it. I'm thinking dinner this Friday, then back to my place for some private negotiations. He saw me standing in the doorway and held up a finger, continuing his conversation. Trust me, these working girls are always looking for a way to advance their careers. A little attention from management goes a long way, if you know what I mean. He finally hung up and looked at me with a smirk. Sam, just the man I wanted to see. I need you to do something for me, and it requires discretion. He handed me an envelope. I need you to deliver this to Sarah Johnson in marketing. Hand it to her personally, and make sure no one else sees it. I took the envelope, my skin crawling at the implications. Yes, sir. And Sam, if anyone asks what you're doing, you're just delivering routine paperwork. Understood. Understood. I found Sarah Johnson at her desk in the marketing department. She was a woman in her late 40s, professionally dressed but with tired eyes that spoke of years of disappointment. When I approached with the envelope, her face immediately tensed. From Mr. Stevens, I said quietly, handing it over. She took it with trembling hands, and I saw her glance around nervously before opening it. As she read, her face went pale, then flushed with anger and humiliation. Tell Mr. Stevens, she said in a voice barely above a whisper, that I'm not interested in discussing my career advancement over dinner. Ma'am, just tell him I got the message. I nodded and started to walk away, but she called me back. Sam, you seem like a decent person. Be careful around here. Some of these people, they're not what they appear to be. Her warning hit me harder than she could have known. If only she realized that the person she was trying to protect was the one person who could actually help her. The rest of the morning was spent running errands for various managers, each task designed to reinforce my position at the bottom of the hierarchy. I picked up lunch orders, made copies, delivered messages, and endured a constant stream of casual insults and dismissive comments. Sam, try not to mess this up like you did yesterday, became a common refrain, even when I hadn't made any mistakes. Are you sure you can handle this? It might be too complicated for someone with your background. Maybe you should stick to simpler tasks. We don't want to overwhelm you. Each comment was designed to chip away at my confidence, to make me feel small and worthless. And I was beginning to understand how effective this psychological warfare could be. Even knowing who I really was Even knowing that I had the power to fire every one of these people, I found myself starting to doubt my own abilities. Lunch was a revelation in itself. I sat in the break room with my brown bag lunch, listening to conversations that revealed the true scope of the toxic culture I'd unknowingly created. "Did you hear about what happened to James Wilson?" one employee whispered to another. "The veteran? What about him?" Mike Torres was making fun of his anxiety again. Called him a broken soldier who couldn't handle the real world. "That's horrible. James is one of the hardest workers we have." "Doesn't matter. Mike's got it out for him. I heard he's been documenting every little mistake James makes, building a case to get him fired." "Why doesn't someone report Mike?" "To who? Jennifer? She's the one who hired him." "Brad? He thinks Mike's management material. The whole system is rigged." I felt my anger building as I listened to this. James Wilson was a decorated veteran who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan. The idea that he was being bullied for having PTSD was beyond disgusting. It was criminal. After lunch, I was assigned to help David Kim with some data entry. David was a recent college graduate, clearly brilliant but painfully shy. As we worked together, I began to understand the daily hell he was experiencing. "Sam," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." Do you think there's something wrong with me?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, everyone here treats me like I'm stupid. Mike Torres acts like I can't understand basic instructions because of my accent. Karen Mitchell makes comments about my cultural background affecting my work performance. Even some of the other employees act like I don't belong here." I looked at this young man, brilliant, hardworking, eager to contribute, and felt my heart break. "David, there's nothing wrong with you. You're one of the smartest people in this building. Then why do they treat me like this?" I wanted to tell him the truth. I wanted to explain that the people treating him badly were about to lose their jobs, that their behavior was unacceptable and would not be tolerated. Instead, I had to stay in character. Some people are just threatened by intelligence. They tear others down to make themselves feel better. "I've been thinking about quitting," he admitted. "I can't take much more of this." "Don't quit," I said, perhaps more forcefully than Sam Parker should have. "You belong here. Don't let them drive you away." He looked at me with surprise, and I realized I'd let my real feelings show through. I quickly returned to my work, but I could feel him watching me with curiosity. The afternoon brought my first direct confrontation with the toxic culture. I was in the copy room when I heard raised voices from the accounting department. Through the glass partition, I could see Karen Mitchell standing over Maria Santos, her face red with anger. "This is completely unacceptable." Karen was shouting. "These numbers are wrong, the formatting is sloppy, and you've missed half the deadlines." "Mrs. Mitchell, I can explain." "I don't want explanations. I want competence. Maybe if you spent less time on personal calls and more time focusing on your job, we wouldn't have these problems." "I haven't made any personal calls." "Are you calling me a liar?" "Because I have documentation of your phone usage." I knew this was a lie. I'd been watching Maria all week, and she barely took breaks, let alone personal calls. But Karen was creating a paper trail, building a case for termination based on fabricated evidence. "I'm writing you up for insubordination," Karen continued. "And if I see any more attitude from you, you're gone. Do you understand me?" Maria nodded, tears streaming down her face. As Karen walked away, I saw Maria collapse into her chair, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I wanted to go to her, to offer comfort, to tell her that justice was coming. But I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I made another note in my phone, adding this incident to the growing mountain of evidence. The day ended with a staff meeting called by Jennifer Walsh. All the lower-level employees were required to attend, while the managers sat at the front of the room like judges presiding over a trial. "I've been hearing complaints," Jennifer began, her voice dripping with disdain. "Complaints about workload, about management style, about company policies. Let me be very clear. This company doesn't owe you anything beyond your paycheck. If you don't like the way things are run here, you're free to find employment elsewhere." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I've also heard rumors about employees discussing their grievances with each other. Let me remind you that gossip and negativity are not tolerated. Your job is to work, not to socialize or complain. Anyone caught spreading rumors or creating a negative atmosphere will face disciplinary action." Brad Stevens stood up next. "Jennifer's right. We've built something special here at DataFlow, and we won't let a few malcontents destroy what we've created." If you're not happy here, if you can't appreciate the opportunities you've been given, then maybe this isn't the right place for you. I looked around the room at my employees, people who were being systematically abused, and then told they should be grateful for the privilege. Their faces showed a mixture of fear, anger, and resignation that made me sick to my stomach. Mike Torres was the last to speak. I want to add something about loyalty. This company has invested in all of you, given you jobs when you might not have found them elsewhere. The least you can do is show some appreciation instead of constantly complaining about every little thing. As the meeting ended and employees filed out in silence, I realized that what I was witnessing wasn't just workplace bullying. It was systematic psychological abuse designed to break people's spirits and make them compliant. That night, I went home to my penthouse apartment and sat in my study, reviewing the notes I'd taken. In just 1 week as Sam Parker, I'd documented enough harassment, discrimination, and abuse to justify firing half my management team and potentially face criminal charges. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to see how deep this went, how far these people were willing to go in their cruelty. And I had a feeling that the worst was yet to come. As I prepared for my second week undercover, I made a promise to myself and to my employees. No matter how bad things got, no matter how much I had to endure, I would see this through to the end. Justice was coming to DataFlow Solutions, and it would be swift, decisive, and absolute. The bullies had no idea that their victim was about to become their judge, jury, and executioner. Chapter 4: The Breaking Point. My second week as Sam Parker began with an incident that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I arrived at work to find James Wilson, the military veteran, sitting at his desk with his head in his hands, his whole body shaking. "James?" I approached carefully. "Are you okay?" He looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much pain. "They're trying to fire me, Sam. After everything I've been through, everything I've sacrificed for this country, they're going to fire me because I have anxiety." "What happened?" "Mike Torres. He's been documenting every time I have a panic attack, every time I need a moment to collect myself. He's calling it inability to handle stress and unprofessional behavior. He doesn't understand that some of us carry invisible wounds." I felt rage building in my chest. James Wilson had earned a Purple Heart in Afghanistan. He'd saved lives, served his country with honor, and now he was being persecuted for the psychological scars that service had left him with. "Have you talked to HR?" James laughed bitterly. "Jennifer Walsh told me that if I can't handle the demands of a professional environment, maybe I should look into disability benefits. She actually suggested I was trying to scam the system. That's illegal. They can't discriminate against you for having PTSD. Can't they? Who's going to stop them? They'll just say I was fired for performance issues. They've got documentation, witnesses, a whole paper trail that makes me look incompetent." I wanted to tell him right then and there that I was the CEO, that these people would be gone by the end of the week, that he would be protected and compensated for what he'd endured. But I couldn't break cover. "Not yet. Don't give up," I said instead. "Sometimes justice comes from unexpected places." He looked at me with curiosity. "You're different from the other temps we've had, Sam. There's something about you, like you actually care." "I do care. More than you know." The morning brought a new level of cruelty that I hadn't thought possible. Karen Mitchell called Maria Santos into her office, and I could hear the conversation through the thin walls. "Maria, we need to discuss your performance issues." "What performance issues?" "I've been meeting all my deadlines. My accuracy rate is above average." "Your attitude, Maria. You've been sullen, uncooperative, resistant to feedback. Several people have complained about your behavior." "What people? What behavior?" "I'm not going to name names, but the complaints are serious. Accusations of insubordination, failure to follow instructions, creating a negative work environment." I knew this was all fabricated. I'd been watching Maria for 2 weeks, and she was one of the most professional, hardworking people in the building. But Karen was building a case for termination based on lies. "I don't understand," Maria said, her voice breaking. "I've done everything you've asked. I work late, I come in early, I never complain. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you're trying too hard to prove something instead of just doing your job. Some people aren't cut out for corporate culture, Maria. There's no shame in admitting that. Are you firing me? I'm giving you a choice. You can resign with a neutral reference, or we can continue down this path and see where it leads. But I should warn you, if we have to terminate you for cause, it will be very difficult for you to find another job in this industry." The threat was clear. Quit now, or we'll destroy your career." I listened to Maria crying, knowing that she was a single mother who couldn't afford to be unemployed, who was being forced to choose between her dignity and her survival. "I need this job," Maria whispered. "Then I suggest you adjust your attitude. Consider this your final warning." I made another note in my phone, my hands shaking with anger. Karen Mitchell wasn't just a bully. She was a predator who targeted the most vulnerable employees and systematically destroyed them. The afternoon brought an incident that nearly broke my cover. I was delivering files to the IT department when I witnessed Mike Torres cornering David Kim near the server room. "David, we need to talk about your performance," Mike said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "What about my performance? The code you submitted yesterday was garbage. Full of errors, completely unusable. I had to spend 3 hours fixing your mistakes." "That's not possible. I tested that code extensively." "Are you calling me a liar? Because I have the error logs right here." Mike pulled out a printout, but I could see from where I stood that he'd doctored it. The timestamps were wrong, the error messages were fabricated. The whole thing was a setup designed to humiliate David. "I don't understand," David said, his voice small and confused. "I know that code was working. Maybe the problem is that you don't understand as much as you think you do. Maybe your education wasn't as good as you thought. Maybe there are cultural differences that make it hard for you to grasp certain concepts." The racist implications were clear, and I saw David's face crumble. This brilliant young man was being told that his race and background made him inherently inferior, and he was starting to believe it. "I can fix whatever's wrong," David said desperately. "Can you? Because this isn't the first time we've had problems with your work. I'm starting to think you might not be a good fit for this department. Please, I need this job. I'll work harder, Working harder isn't the issue, David. Some people just don't have what it takes for technical work. There's no shame in admitting your limitations." I watched this young man's confidence being systematically destroyed, and I nearly broke character right then and there. I wanted to grab Mike Torres by the throat and tell him exactly what I thought of his racist bullying. Instead, I forced myself to keep walking, to maintain my cover, to document everything for the reckoning that was coming. But the worst was yet to come. Around 4 p.m., I was called to Brad Stevens' office. He was sitting behind his desk with a predatory smile that made my skin crawl. "Sam, I have a special assignment for you. Something that requires discretion." "Yes, sir. I need you to deliver this to Sarah Johnson." He handed me another envelope. "But this time, I want you to wait for her response and bring it back to me immediately." I took the envelope, knowing that whatever was inside was going to be worse than the last one. I found Sarah at her desk, and when I handed her the envelope, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely open it. As she read, her face went white, then red, then white again. She looked around the office, then at me, then back at the letter. "Tell Mr. Stevens," she said in a voice barely above a whisper, "that I can't. I won't." She couldn't finish the sentence. Instead, she crumpled up the letter and threw it in the trash, then put her head in her hands and started crying. "Ma'am? What should I tell him? Tell him I quit. Tell him I'm done. Tell him he can take his job and his threats and his disgusting propositions and go to hell." She started packing her things immediately, throwing personal items into a box with shaking hands. Other employees were watching, but no one dared to ask what was happening. "Sarah," I said quietly, "you don't have to quit. There are other options." "No, there aren't," she said without looking up. "You don't understand how this works, Sam. If I stay, if I fight, they'll destroy me. They'll make my life hell until I break completely. At least this way, I leave with some dignity intact. What if someone could help you? What if there was a way to make them pay for what they've done?" She looked at me with sad, tired eyes. "There's no one to help people like us, Sam. The system is rigged. The powerful protect each other, and the rest of us are expendable." I watched her walk out of the building, carrying her box of personal belongings, another casualty of the toxic culture I'd unknowingly allowed to flourish. And I knew that I couldn't wait any longer. The time for observation was over. It was time for action. But first, I had to deliver Sarah's message to Brad Stevens. I found him in his office, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied smirk. "Well, what did she say?" "She quit, sir." His smirk widened. "Did she now? How unfortunate. I suppose some people just can't handle the pressures of corporate life." "She seemed upset, sir." "I'm sure she was. But that's what happens when people don't know their place, Sam. Sometimes you have to remind them who's in charge." He leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. Let this be a lesson to you, Sam. In this company, in this world, there are two kinds of people. Those who have. Let this be a lesson to you, Sam. In this company, in this world, there are two kinds of people. Those who have power and those who don't. Sarah thought she could reject my generous offers and still keep her job. She was wrong. I felt my hands clench into fists behind my back. What kind of offers, sir? Brad's smile turned predatory. The kind that could have advanced her career significantly. But some people are too proud, too stupid to recognize opportunity when it's presented to them. I see, sir. Do you, Sam? Because I want to make sure you understand how things work around here. Cooperation is rewarded. Resistance is discouraged. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir. As I left his office, I realized that Brad Stevens had just confessed to sexual harassment and retaliation. He was so confident in his power, so certain that a lowly temp worker posed no threat, that he'd openly admitted to crimes that could send him to prison. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of rage and determination. I watched Karen Mitchell continue to torment Maria Santos, saw Mike Torres humiliate David Kim in front of his colleagues, witnessed Jennifer Walsh dismiss another harassment complaint with casual indifference. But the final straw came at 5:30 p.m., just as most employees were preparing to leave for the day. I was in the break room when I heard shouting from the accounting department. Through the glass partition, I could see James Wilson standing at his desk, his whole body shaking with what I recognized as a panic attack. Mike Torres was standing over him, his voice loud and mocking. What's wrong, soldier boy? Can't handle a little pressure? Maybe you should call for backup. Please, James gasped, struggling to breathe. I just need a moment. A moment? This is a workplace, not a therapy session. If you can't do the job, maybe you should find something more suited to your condition. Other employees were watching in horror, but no one dared to intervene. James was hyperventilating now, his face pale and sweaty, clearly in the grip of a severe anxiety attack. Look at him, Mike continued, his voice dripping with contempt. The big tough soldier, falling apart over a little criticism. What a joke. That's when James collapsed. He hit the floor hard, his body convulsing as the panic attack reached its peak. Several employees rushed to help him, but Mike Torres just stood there laughing. Pathetic, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Absolutely pathetic. I couldn't take it anymore. I rushed over to James, kneeling beside him as he struggled to breathe. James, look at me, I said, my voice calm and authoritative. You're having a panic attack. It's going to pass. Focus on my voice. I guided him through breathing exercises, techniques I'd learned when researching PTSD after hiring several veterans. Slowly, his breathing began to normalize, his color returned, and the shaking subsided. Thank you, he whispered. I don't know what happened. I couldn't. You don't need to explain, I said. You're going to be okay. Mike Torres was still standing there, his expression one of disgust. Great, now we're running a mental health clinic. Maybe next we can hire some therapy dogs. I stood up slowly, my entire body vibrating with rage. For 2 weeks, I'd watched these people destroy my employees, and I'd stayed silent. But this was too much. This was the line I couldn't let them cross. That's enough, I said, my voice carrying an authority that made everyone in the room freeze. Mike looked at me with surprise. Excuse me? Did the temp just tell me what to do? I said that's enough. James is a decorated veteran who served his country with honor. He deserves respect, not mockery. Who the hell do you think you are? Mike stepped closer, trying to intimidate me. You're a nobody, a temp worker who'll be gone next week. You don't get to lecture me about anything. You're wrong about that, I said, my voice deadly quiet. I'm not going anywhere. But you are. Something in my tone must have registered, because Mike's expression changed from anger to confusion. Around us, other employees were watching with wide eyes, sensing that something significant was happening. What did you just say? Mike demanded. I looked around the room at all the faces watching us. Maria Santos with her tear-stained cheeks, David Kim with his broken confidence, James Wilson still recovering from his panic attack, and a dozen other employees who'd been suffering in silence for months or years. I said you're fired, I repeated, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. All of you. Mike Torres, Karen Mitchell, Brad Stevens, Jennifer Walsh, you're all fired, effective immediately. Mike laughed, but it sounded forced. You can't fire anyone, you idiot. You're a temp. No, I said, reaching into my wallet and pulling out my real ID. I'm Alex Morgan. I'm the CEO of this company. And you've just spent 2 weeks showing me exactly what kind of people you really are. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that room as the implications of what I'd just said sank in. Mike's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, recognition, and finally pure terror. That's impossible, he stammered. You're Sam Parker. You're just a temp. Sam Parker was a role I played to see how my company really operates when I'm not around. And what I found was a culture of abuse, harassment, and cruelty that ends right now. I looked around the room at my employees, my real employees, the people I'd failed to protect. Maria, you're not fired. You never were. Karen Mitchell had no authority to threaten your job, and every accusation she made against you was fabricated. Maria's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. David, your code wasn't garbage. Mike Torres doctored those error logs to make you look incompetent. You're one of the most talented programmers we have. David stared at me in shock, unable to speak. James, you're not broken and you're not pathetic. You're a hero who served his country, and anyone who mocks you for having PTSD is the one who should be ashamed. I turned back to Mike Torres, who was now backing toward the door. Security will escort you out of the building, I said. All of you. Your personal belongings will be shipped to you. Don't bother cleaning out your desks. You're not welcome in this building ever again. You can't do this. Mike protested. I have rights. I have a contract. You have the right to remain silent, I said. Because everything you've done here for the past 2 weeks has been recorded, documented, and witnessed. Sexual harassment, racial discrimination, abuse of disabled veterans. You're going to be very busy with lawyers for the next few years. As security arrived to escort the fired managers out of the building, I turned to address the remaining employees who had gathered to watch the confrontation. I owe all of you an apology, I said. I trusted the wrong people to run this company, and you paid the price for my poor judgment. That ends today. Mr. Morgan, Maria said, her voice shaking. Is this real? Are they really gone? They're really gone. And they're never coming back. The room erupted in a mixture of cheers, tears, and stunned silence. Employees who had been living in fear for months or years suddenly realized that their nightmare was over. But I wasn't done yet. The reckoning had only just begun. Chapter 5, The Reckoning. The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting in the main conference room. Word had spread quickly through the building about the previous day's events, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation and disbelief. I stood at the front of the room, no longer disguised as Sam Parker, wearing my usual business attire and carrying myself with the authority of someone who owned the building we were standing in. Ladies and gentlemen, I began. My name is Alex Morgan, and I'm the CEO of DataFlow Solutions. For the past 2 weeks, I've been working among you as Sam Parker, a temporary office assistant. What I discovered during that time has fundamentally changed how I view this company and my responsibilities as a leader. The room was silent, every eye focused on me. I went undercover because anonymous employee surveys indicated serious problems with workplace culture. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. I found a systematic pattern of abuse, harassment, and discrimination that had been allowed to flourish under my watch. I clicked a remote, and a presentation began on the large screen behind me. Jennifer Walsh, your former HR manager, dismissed legitimate harassment complaints and threatened employees who tried to report abuse. She will face criminal charges for civil rights violations and conspiracy to commit workplace discrimination. A photo of Jennifer appeared on the screen, followed by a list of her documented offenses. Brad Stevens, your former operations director, sexually harassed multiple female employees and retaliated against those who rejected his advances. He will face criminal charges for sexual harassment, abuse of power, and creating a hostile work environment. Brad's photo appeared next, along with recorded excerpts from his conversations that made several people in the audience gasp. Karen Mitchell, your former accounting supervisor, engaged in racial discrimination, wage theft, and systematic psychological abuse of subordinates. She will face both criminal charges and civil lawsuits from her victims. Mike Torres, your former IT manager, bullied employees based on race, disability status, and perceived weakness. His treatment of our military veterans was particularly despicable, and he will face the full consequences of his actions. As each photo appeared on the screen, I could see the relief and vindication on my employees' faces. People who had been told they were crazy, oversensitive, or incompetent were finally seeing their abusers held accountable. But accountability isn't enough, I continued. We need to rebuild this company's culture from the ground up. We need to create an environment where every employee feels valued, respected, and safe. I clicked to the next slide, which outlined a comprehensive reform plan. Effective immediately, we're implementing new policies and procedures designed to prevent this kind of abuse from ever happening again. We're creating an independent ombudsman office where employees can report concerns without fear of retaliation. We're instituting mandatory training for all managers on respectful workplace behavior. And we're establishing a zero-tolerance policy for harassment, discrimination, and bullying. The audience was listening intently, but I could see skepticism in some faces. They'd been burned before by promises of change that never materialized. I know some of you are thinking that this is just corporate speak, that nothing will really change. I understand that skepticism. You've been let down before. But I want you to know that this isn't just about policies and procedures. This is personal for me. I paused, gathering my thoughts. For 2 weeks, I experienced what many of you have been living with for months or years. I was insulted, belittled, and treated as disposable. I watched good people being destroyed by petty tyrants who abused their power. And I realized that no amount of profit, no level of success, is worth building on a foundation of human suffering. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a new organizational chart. We're promoting several employees who showed integrity and courage during this difficult time. Maria Santos will become our new Director of Employee Relations, with a mandate to ensure that every worker in this company is treated with dignity and respect. Maria gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as applause erupted around her. David Kim will become our new lead software architect, with the authority to build the kind of inclusive, collaborative development team that reflects our values. David looked stunned as his colleagues congratulated him. James Wilson will head our new veteran support program, helping us recruit and support military veterans while ensuring they receive the respect and accommodation they deserve. James stood up slowly, tears streaming down his face as the room gave him a standing ovation. These promotions aren't charity, I continued. They're recognition of talent, character, and leadership that was being suppressed by people who felt threatened by excellence. I clicked to the final slide, which showed a simple message: your voice matters. Going forward, I want every employee to know that your concerns will be heard, your contributions will be valued, and your dignity will be protected. This company exists because of your hard work and dedication, and it's my job to make sure you're treated accordingly. I paused, looking around the room at faces that showed hope for the first time in months. I also want to address the elephant in the room. Some of you are probably wondering why I didn't just fire these people when I first heard about the problems. Why did I feel the need to go undercover? Several people nodded. The truth is, I didn't believe it was as bad as the surveys indicated. I trusted my senior managers when they told me the complaints were exaggerated or fabricated. I was wrong, and my failure to act sooner allowed good people to suffer unnecessarily. That's on me, and I take full responsibility for it. But Mr. Morgan, called out an employee from the back, how do we know this won't happen again? How do we know the next group of managers won't be just as bad? It was a fair question, and one I'd been expecting. You don't, I said honestly. You have to trust that I've learned from this experience, that I understand now how important it is to stay connected to what's really happening in this company. But more importantly, you now have systems in place to hold me accountable. The Ombudsman Office reports directly to the Board of Directors, not to me. The Employee Advocacy Program has the authority to investigate any complaint, including complaints about my own behavior. What about the people who stayed silent? Asked another employee. The ones who knew what was happening but didn't speak up? This was a more difficult question. I'd identified several employees who had witnessed abuse but failed to report it, either out of fear or indifference. Fear is understandable, I said. When your job is on the line, when you have a family to support, speaking up takes enormous courage. I don't blame anyone for being afraid. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But going forward, silence in the face of abuse is not acceptable. We all have a responsibility to protect each other, to speak up when we see wrongdoing, to create a culture where bullies can't operate in the shadows. That's not just management's job, it's everyone's job. The meeting continued for another hour, with employees asking questions, sharing their experiences, and beginning the process of healing from months or years of trauma. As people filed out, many stopped to thank me, to share their stories, or to express their hope that things would really change. But the most meaningful conversation came from an unexpected source. "Mr. Morgan?" I turned to see Tom Bradley, a middle manager who had witnessed much of the abuse but never reported it. He looked ashamed and nervous. "I need to apologize," he said. "I knew what Karen was doing to Maria. I saw how Mike treated David and James. I heard the things Brad said about female employees. And I did nothing." "Why?" I asked, not accusingly, but genuinely wanting to understand. "Because I was scared. Because I thought if I kept my head down, if I didn't make waves, I'd be safe. Because I told myself it wasn't my problem." He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "I was a coward, and good people suffered because of my cowardice. What are you going to do differently going forward?" "Everything," he said firmly. "I'm going to speak up. I'm going to protect people who can't protect themselves. I'm going to be the kind of person I should have been all along." "Then you've learned the most important lesson of all," I said. "It's not about being perfect. It's about being better than you were yesterday." As the building emptied and I returned to my office, I reflected on the events of the past 2 weeks. The undercover operation had been more difficult and more revealing than I'd expected. I'd seen the worst of human nature, but I'd also seen incredible resilience, dignity, and courage from people who had every reason to give up. My phone rang. It was my lawyer. "Alex, I've been reviewing the evidence you collected. We have enough to pursue criminal charges against all 4 of the terminated managers. The recordings alone are damning, and with witness testimony, we can probably get convictions on multiple counts." "Good. I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." "There's something else. Several of the victims want to file civil lawsuits against the company. They have strong cases for hostile work environment, discrimination, and emotional distress." "Let them sue," I said without hesitation. "They deserve compensation for what they went through. And maybe paying damages will remind me never to let something like this happen again. That could cost millions. It should cost millions. Money is the only language some people understand, and I want the message to be crystal clear. This kind of behavior will not be tolerated, and there will be consequences." After hanging up, I walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Somewhere out there, Jennifer Walsh, Brad Stevens, Karen Mitchell, and Mike Torres were probably trying to figure out how their lives had imploded so quickly. They'd gone from positions of power to facing criminal charges in the span of 24 hours. But I didn't feel sorry for them. They'd made their choices, and now they would face the consequences. What I felt was responsibility. Responsibility to the employees who had trusted me with their livelihoods, their careers, their dignity. Responsibility to ensure that the culture we built going forward would be worthy of their dedication and hard work. My assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Morgan? There's someone here to see you. She says it's important." "Who is it?" "Sarah Johnson. The woman who quit yesterday." I felt my heart skip a beat. Sarah had been one of Brad Stevens' victims, driven out of the company by his harassment and threats. What was she doing here? "Send her in." Sarah entered my office looking nervous but determined. She was carrying a folder thick with documents. "Mr. Morgan, I heard what happened today. About you being undercover, about the firings. I wanted to thank you." "You don't need to thank me, Sarah. I should have protected you from the beginning. You couldn't have known. But there's something else." She held up the folder. "I've been documenting Brad Stevens' behavior for over a year. Every inappropriate comment, every unwanted advance, every threat. I was too scared to report it while I worked here, but now." She handed me the folder. Inside were detailed notes, printed emails, even some audio recordings she'd made on her phone. "This is incredible, Sarah. This evidence could put Brad away for years." "I hope it does. But more than that, I hope it helps other women who might face the same thing. I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through. Would you consider coming back to work here? We need people with your integrity and courage." She was quiet for a moment, considering. "I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. The trauma is still too fresh. But maybe someday, when I've had time to heal. The door is always open. And Sarah, you're not a victim anymore. You're a survivor, and you're helping to make sure this never happens to anyone else." After she left, I spent the evening reviewing her documentation. The evidence was damning. A clear pattern of escalating harassment that painted Brad Stevens as a serial predator who had been using his position to abuse vulnerable employees for years. I called my lawyer again. We need to expand the criminal case against Brad Stevens. I have new evidence that shows this wasn't isolated incidents. It was systematic predatory behavior. How extensive is the evidence? Extensive enough to put him away for a very long time. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Criminal charges were filed against all 4 terminated managers. The story broke in the business press, with headlines like, "Tech CEO Goes Undercover, Exposes Massive Workplace Abuse Scandal," and "The Boss Who Became an Employee to Save His Company." The media attention was intense, but mostly positive. Other CEOs reached out to ask about implementing similar oversight programs. Employment lawyers called to discuss best practices for preventing workplace harassment. HR professionals wanted to know about our new policies and procedures. But the most meaningful feedback came from my own employees. "Mr. Morgan," Maria said during our first one-on-one meeting since her promotion, "I want you to know that what you did going undercover, experiencing what we experienced, it means everything to us. You didn't just fire the bad managers. You showed us that you actually care about what happens to us. I should have cared sooner. Maybe. But you care now, and that's what matters. The question is, how do we make sure this never happens again?" It was a good question, and one I'd been thinking about constantly. "We stay vigilant," I said. "We listen to our employees. We create systems that make it safe to report problems. And we never, ever assume that everything is fine just because the people in charge say it is." What about the culture change? How do we rebuild trust? One day at a time. One interaction at a time. One decision at a time. We prove through our actions that we mean what we say about respect and dignity. Over the following weeks, I implemented a series of changes designed to prevent future abuse. Monthly coffee with the CEO sessions where any employee could speak with me directly about concerns. Anonymous suggestion boxes in every department. Mandatory 360-degree reviews for all managers, including feedback from subordinates. Regular culture surveys with results published company-wide. An open-door policy that allowed any employee to bypass their immediate supervisor if necessary. But perhaps the most important change was personal. I moved my office from the executive floor to the main work area, where I could see and interact with employees daily. I ate lunch in the cafeteria instead of the executive dining room. I made it a point to know people's names, their projects, their concerns. I never wanted to be an invisible CEO again. 3 months after the undercover operation, we held our first company-wide culture celebration. It was a chance to recognize employees who had shown courage during the crisis, to celebrate our progress, and to recommit to our values. 6 months ago, I told the assembled crowd, this company was broken. Not financially, we were profitable. Not technically, our products were excellent. But morally, ethically, we were broken. We had allowed a culture of abuse to flourish while we focused on the bottom line. I paused, looking out at faces that now showed hope instead of fear. Today, we're not just a different company, we're a better company. We're proof that you can be successful without sacrificing your humanity. We're proof that treating people with dignity and respect isn't just the right thing to do, it's good business. The applause was thunderous, but I held up my hand for quiet. But we can't become complacent. Culture isn't something you fix once and forget about. It's something you have to nurture and protect every single day. It's something we all have to take responsibility for. "Mr. Morgan," called out David Kim, who had flourished in his new role as lead software architect. "What's your message to other companies that might be dealing with similar problems?" "My message is simple. Your employees are human beings, not resources to be exploited. They have families, dreams, fears, and aspirations. They deserve to be treated with dignity, regardless of their position in the hierarchy. And if you're not willing to ensure that happens, you have no business being a leader." After the celebration, I returned to my office to find a letter on my desk. It was from James Wilson, our new Director of Veterans Affairs. "Mr. Morgan," it read, "I wanted you to know that yesterday marked 6 months since my last panic attack. For the first time since returning from Afghanistan, I feel safe at work. I feel valued. I feel like I belong. You gave me back my dignity, and I will never forget that. Thank you for seeing the person behind the disability, the hero behind the wounds. Thank you for proving that good leaders protect their people, especially the most vulnerable ones." I sat back in my chair, feeling a sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with profit margins or stock prices. This was what success really looked like. Not just building a profitable company, but building a place where people could thrive, where they could bring their whole selves to work without fear of abuse or discrimination. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Saw the news about your company. Thinking about implementing something similar at my organization. Any advice? Fellow CEO. I smiled and typed back. Best advice I can give. Don't wait for a crisis to care about your people. And remember, you can't manage what you don't measure, and you can't measure what you don't experience firsthand. As the sun set over the city, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. 2 weeks as Sam Parker had taught me more about leadership than 8 years as Alex Morgan. I'd learned that true power isn't the ability to control people. It's the responsibility to protect them. I'd learned that success built on others' suffering is no success at all. And I'd learned that sometimes the most important thing a leader can do is step down from their pedestal and walk among the people they serve. The bullies were gone. The culture was healing. The company was stronger than ever. But most importantly, my employees knew that they mattered. They knew that their voices would be heard, their dignity would be protected, and their contributions would be valued. That was worth more than all the money in the world. Epilogue, 1 year later. The annual DataFlow Solutions company meeting was unlike any we'd ever held before. Instead of a sterile corporate presentation in a hotel ballroom, we gathered in our own building, in a space that had been redesigned to reflect our values of openness, collaboration, and respect. I stood before 300 employees. We'd grown by 50% in the past year, as word spread about our culture transformation, and felt a sense of pride that had nothing to do with financial metrics. 1 year ago, I made a decision that changed my life and the life of this company. I decided to stop being a CEO who managed from a distance and become a leader who understood what his employees actually experienced. On the screen behind me, photos appeared from that transformative 2 weeks. Pictures of me as Sam Parker, looking tired and defeated, interspersed with images of the toxic managers who had been destroying our culture. What I discovered was that I had built a successful company on a foundation of human suffering, that our profits were coming at the cost of our people's dignity. That success without integrity is just elaborate failure. The audience was silent, many of them remembering those dark days when coming to work felt like entering a war zone. Today, I'm proud to report that we've not only survived our culture transformation, we've thrived because of it. I clicked to the next slide, showing our performance metrics for the year. Revenue is up 40%. Employee satisfaction scores have increased by 200%. Turnover is at an all-time low. We've won 3 industry awards for workplace excellence. And we've been named one of the best places to work by every major business publication. The applause was enthusiastic, but I held up my hand. But those numbers, impressive as they are, don't tell the real story. The real story is in the faces I see before me. The real story is in the emails I get from employees thanking me for creating a place where they can be themselves. The real story is in the fact that people are excited to come to work instead of dreading it. I clicked to the next slide, which showed testimonials from employees. Maria Santos, our Director of Employee Relations, wrote, "For the first time in my career, I feel like my voice matters. I'm not just surviving at work, I'm thriving." David Kim, our lead software architect, said, "I used to hide my ideas because I was afraid of being mocked. Now I'm leading innovation projects that are changing our industry." James Wilson, our Director of Veterans Affairs, shared, "This company didn't just give me a job, it gave me back my sense of purpose and belonging." I paused, feeling the emotion in the room. But perhaps the most meaningful feedback came from an unexpected source. Last month, I received a letter from Karen Mitchell, one of the managers we terminated for abusive behavior. A murmur went through the audience. Karen had been one of the worst offenders, the supervisor who had tormented Maria and created a climate of fear in the accounting department. She wrote, "Mr. Morgan, I want you to know that losing my job at DataFlow was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to confront the kind of person I had become, the damage I was doing to others. I've spent the past year in therapy, learning about my own insecurities and how they led me to hurt people who didn't deserve it. I'm working at a small nonprofit now, trying to use my skills to help people instead of hurting them. I'll never be able to undo the damage I caused, but I can make sure I never cause that kind of pain again. Thank you for holding me accountable when no one else would." The room was completely silent now, the weight of redemption and responsibility settling over everyone. That letter reminded me that our actions here don't just affect us, they ripple out into the world. When we create a culture of respect and dignity, we're not just making our workplace better. We're making our employees better people, better parents, better community members. We're proving that business can be a force for good in the world. I clicked to the final slide, which showed a simple message. The future is what we build together. As we look ahead to the next year, I want to challenge all of us to remember that culture isn't something that happens to us. It's something we create together, every day, through every interaction. We have the power to make this the kind of place where everyone can succeed, where everyone feels valued, where everyone can bring their best selves to work. But I also want to challenge other leaders who might be watching this presentation online. If you're a CEO who thinks you know what's happening in your company, I dare you to find out for sure. If you're a manager who thinks your employees are happy, I challenge you to ask them directly. If you're a leader who believes that profits matter more than people, I invite you to reconsider what success really means. The applause that followed was the loudest I'd ever heard in that building. But as it died down, a hand went up in the back of the room. Mr. Morgan, this is all inspiring, but how do we know it will last? How do we know that in 5 years, 10 years, we won't slide back into the old patterns? It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself. We don't know, I said honestly. Culture is fragile. It requires constant attention, constant reinforcement, constant vigilance. But I can promise you this. As long as I'm CEO of this company, I will never stop fighting for the values we've established. I will never stop listening to your concerns. And I will never, ever allow anyone to treat you with anything less than the respect and dignity you deserve. And if something happens to you, if you leave or retire or get hit by a bus? The question drew nervous laughter, but it was serious. Then it will be up to all of you to carry these values forward. Culture isn't dependent on one person. It's the collective responsibility of everyone in the organization. The policies we've put in place, the systems we've created, the expectations we've established, they're designed to outlast any individual leader. After the meeting, I walked through the building, stopping to chat with employees, checking in on projects, and simply observing the atmosphere. What I saw filled me with hope. In the break room, I watched a senior developer patiently explaining a complex concept to a new intern, treating her questions with respect and encouragement instead of condescension. In the accounting department, I saw Maria Santos leading a team meeting where everyone's input was valued and considered, where disagreement was handled with professionalism and respect. In the IT department, I observed David Kim mentoring a group of junior programmers, sharing his knowledge freely and building up their confidence instead of tearing it down. This was what success looked like. Not just profitable quarters or impressive growth metrics, but human beings treating each other with dignity and respect. People who felt safe to be themselves, to share their ideas, to take risks and learn from mistakes. As I returned to my office, I found a package on my desk. Inside was a book, Undercover Boss, Lessons in Leadership from the Front Lines by Alex Morgan. I smiled, remembering the publisher who had approached me about writing a book about my experience. I'd initially resisted, thinking that the story was too personal, too specific to my company. But eventually, I'd realized that the lessons were universal, and that other leaders needed to hear them. The book had become a bestseller, not because people were interested in corporate drama, but because they were hungry for examples of authentic leadership, of businesses that prioritized people over profits, of success stories that didn't require sacrificing humanity. My phone rang. It was a CEO from a Fortune 500 company. Alex, I just finished reading your book. I think we might have some of the same problems you discovered at DataFlow. Would you be willing to consult with us on implementing a similar culture transformation? I'd be happy to help, I said. But I should warn you, this isn't a quick fix. Real culture change takes time, commitment, and the willingness to confront some uncomfortable truths about your organization. I understand, but after reading about what you accomplished, I know it's possible. And frankly, I can't sleep at night knowing that my employees might be suffering the way yours were. After hanging up, I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 year. DataFlow Solutions had become a case study in business schools, a model for other companies, and proof that treating people well wasn't just morally right, it was good business. But more than that, we had become a family. Not in the fake corporate sense where we're all family is used to justify overwork and underpay, but in the real sense where people genuinely cared about each other's well-being and success. As the sun set over the city, I thought about Sam Parker, the character I had played for 2 transformative weeks. Sam had been invisible, powerless, disposable. Everything that no human being should ever be made to feel. But Sam had also been the key to unlocking the truth about my company and myself. Sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is make themselves powerless. Sometimes the best way to see clearly is to step out of the spotlight. Sometimes the path to authentic success requires walking in the shoes of those you serve. The bullies were gone, but their legacy lived on in the systems we built to prevent their return. The victims had become leaders, but their scars reminded us why vigilance was necessary. The company had transformed, but the work of maintaining that transformation would never end. I picked up my phone and sent a text to the leadership team. Coffee tomorrow morning at 7 a.m.? Want to discuss our expansion plans and make sure we're maintaining our values as we grow. The responses came back immediately. Maria, absolutely. I have some ideas about scaling our employee advocacy program. David, I'll be there. Been thinking about how to maintain our collaborative culture as we add more remote workers. James, wouldn't miss it. The Veterans Hiring Initiative is gaining momentum, and I want to make sure we're prepared. These were the people who had been broken down, dismissed, and nearly driven away by toxic leadership. Now they were my most trusted advisors, the guardians of our company culture, and the proof that redemption was possible for everyone willing to do the work. As I prepared to leave the office, I stopped by the wall where we'd hung photos from our culture transformation journey. There was the picture of me as Sam Parker on my first day, looking nervous and uncertain. Next to it was a photo from our recent company picnic, showing hundreds of employees and their families celebrating together. But the photo that meant the most to me was a simple snapshot taken during a team meeting. It showed Maria Santos confidently presenting to a room full of executives, David Kim leading a brainstorming session with animated enthusiasm, and James Wilson mentoring a young veteran who had just joined our team. These were people who had been told they didn't matter, that they were disposable, that they should be grateful for whatever scraps of respect they received. Now they were leaders, innovators, and the heart of everything we had built. My reflection was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Tom Bradley, the middle manager who had witnessed abuse but stayed silent until my revelation forced him to confront his own cowardice. Mr. Morgan, do you have a minute? Of course, Tom. What's on your mind? I wanted to update you on the mentorship program we discussed. We now have 50 senior employees paired with newer hires, and the feedback has been incredible. People are saying it's the best professional development they've ever experienced. That's fantastic. What's making it so successful? I think it's because we're not just teaching job skills. We're teaching people how to treat each other, how to give feedback constructively, how to support someone who's struggling, how to celebrate successes without making others feel left out. Tom paused, his expression becoming more serious. But there's something else I wanted to tell you. Last week, I witnessed something that reminded me of the old days. A senior developer was being dismissive and condescending to a junior team member. In the past, I would have looked the other way, told myself it wasn't my business. What did you do this time? I intervened. I pulled the senior developer aside and explained that his behavior was unacceptable. I helped the junior developer understand that the treatment he received wasn't normal or acceptable. And I reported the incident to Maria's team so they could follow up. How did it feel? Tom smiled. Terrifying, but also right. For the first time in my career, I felt like I was actually leading instead of just managing. That's the difference between a boss and a leader, Tom. Bosses manage processes. Leaders protect people. After Tom left, I gathered my things and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished steel. I looked older than I had a year ago, but also more at peace. The weight of responsibility was still there, but it felt different now, less like a burden and more like a privilege. The elevator stopped at the lobby, and I walked past the security desk where James, the guard who had worked there for 15 years, was ending his shift. Good night, Mr. Morgan. See you tomorrow. Good night, James. How's your daughter doing in college? Great, thanks for asking. She's studying business administration, says she wants to work for a company like this someday. A place where people actually matter. As I walked to my car, I thought about James's daughter and the thousands of other young people who would enter the workforce in the coming years. What kind of workplace culture would they find? Would they encounter leaders who saw them as human beings worthy of respect, or would they face the same toxic environments that had nearly destroyed my company? The answer, I realized, depended on leaders like me making the choice to do better. It depended on people in positions of power, using that power to protect rather than exploit. It depended on all of us refusing to accept that workplace abuse was just the way things are. My phone buzzed with a notification. It was a LinkedIn message from a young professional I'd never met. "Mr. Morgan, I just started my first job out of college, and my manager has been treating me terribly. I read your book and watched your TED Talk, and I wanted to ask, how do I know if I should speak up or just find another job? I'm scared of making waves, but I also don't want to be a victim." I stopped walking and immediately typed back. "Speak up. Document everything. Find allies. Remember that you have value and dignity that no one has the right to take away. And if your current company won't protect you, find one that will. There are good leaders out there, and you deserve to work for one of them." The response came back quickly. "Thank you. That gives me the courage I needed." As I drove home through the city streets, I thought about all the conversations like that one, happening around the world. Young professionals trying to navigate toxic workplaces, experienced employees wondering if they should speak up about abuse, leaders struggling to create better cultures in their organizations. The transformation at DataFlow Solutions wasn't just about one company. It was about proving that change was possible, that businesses could be both profitable and humane, that leadership could be both effective and ethical. When I arrived home, I found my wife waiting for me with a glass of wine and a knowing smile. "How was your day, Mr. Undercover Boss?" "Good. Really good. We're making a difference, Sarah. Not just at the company, but in the industry. I got 3 calls today from CEOs who want to implement similar programs at their organizations." "I'm proud of you," she said, handing me the wine. "But I'm also proud of who you've become through this process. You're not the same person who started this company 8 years ago." She was right. The Alex Morgan who had built DataFlow Solutions from a garage startup had been focused on success at any cost. He had been willing to trust others to handle the people problems while he focused on the big picture. He had measured success purely in financial terms. The Alex Morgan who sat in his living room now understood that people weren't problems to be managed. They were the entire point of the enterprise. He had learned that true success required taking care of the people who made that success possible. He had discovered that the most important metrics weren't on any financial statement. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked. "Going undercover, I mean. It was risky. You could have been hurt, or the whole thing could have backfired." "Never," I said without hesitation. "It was the most important thing I've ever done. Not just for the company, but for me personally. I needed to understand what it felt like to be powerless, to be dismissed, to be treated as disposable. I needed to see the human cost of the culture I had allowed to develop. And now I know that leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room or making the most money or having the most power. It's about using whatever influence you have to make other people's lives better. It's about creating environments where people can thrive, not just survive." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Somewhere out there, night shift workers were starting their shifts, hoping for respectful treatment from their supervisors. Security guards were protecting buildings, hoping their contributions would be valued. Cleaning crews were maintaining offices, hoping to be seen as human beings rather than invisible servants. Tomorrow, I would continue the work of building a company culture that honored the dignity of every person who walked through our doors. I would mentor other leaders who wanted to create similar transformations in their organizations. I would speak at conferences, write articles, and do whatever I could to spread the message that business could be a force for good in the world. But tonight, I was simply grateful. Grateful for the courage to go undercover as Sam Parker. Grateful for the employees who had trusted me with their stories. Grateful for the opportunity to prove that redemption was possible, both for individuals and for organizations. The bullies were gone, but their victims had become leaders. The toxic culture had been replaced by one built on respect and dignity. The company that had once been a source of suffering had become a beacon of hope. And somewhere in the city, a young professional was finding the courage to speak up against workplace abuse because they had read about a CEO who cared enough to walk in his employees' shoes. That was the real measure of success. Not the money in the bank or the awards on the wall, but the ripple effect of treating people with the respect and dignity they deserved. The invisible CEO had learned to see. The distant leader had learned to connect. The successful businessman had learned what success really meant. And the transformation would continue, one person at a time, one interaction at a time, one choice at a time. Because in the end, that's how you change the world, not through grand gestures or dramatic announcements, but through the daily decision to treat every human being as if they matter. Because they do. The bullies who tormented Sam Parker had no idea they were destroying their own boss. The employees who showed kindness to a struggling temp worker had no idea they were about to be rewarded beyond their wildest dreams. And Alex had no idea that 2 weeks of being treated as invisible would teach him more about leadership than 8 years of running a company. Today, DataFlow Solutions isn't just more profitable. It's proof that you can build success without sacrificing your humanity. The toxic managers are facing criminal charges. The victims have become leaders. And the company culture has transformed from a nightmare into a model that other organizations around the world are trying to replicate. But the most important lesson isn't about business. It's about the power we all have to treat each other with dignity and respect, regardless of someone's position or title. Because you never know who's watching. You never know whose life you might be changing. And you never know when the person you're helping or hurting might turn out to be someone who can change your life forever. Thank you so much for watching this incredible journey with me. Stories like Alex's remind us that real change is possible when leaders have the courage to see the truth and the integrity to act on it. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about how we treat others, please show your support by smashing that subscribe button and hitting the notification bell. Your subscription helps us bring you more powerful, life-changing stories like this one. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever experienced workplace bullying? How would you handle discovering toxic behavior in your organization? And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, please share it with them. Sometimes the right story at the right time can change everything. Thank you for being part of this incredible community, and I'll see you in the next story. The end. Sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is make themselves powerless. Sometimes the best way to see clearly is to step out of the spotlight. Sometimes the path to authentic success requires walking in the shoes of those you serve.